Okay, welcome to episode 3 of DadOTron99's, that's me, Save the World Guide for Beginners. So, in episode 3, we're going to talk about your Storm Shield Defense, or what we call SSDs. Each zone has a bunch of different SSD missions that you will run. You start off in Stonewood, and these progress as you go through the quest line of each zone, right? Started in Stonewood, going through Plankerton, Canny Valley, and Twine Peaks. And for each zone, there is up to 10 levels. So the idea is that this is your home base. This is the shield, the main shield that is powering your shield, which pushes back the storm, right? And protects you from the storm and the effects of it and the husks. Now, the reason I'm here right now, I'm actually in Plankerton, and I'm here because I wanted to show you something really quickly. When you go in here, right, on your Storm Shield base, and you go to the computer here, right, your Storm Shield menu, if you look at the top right there, it shows you that you are, in this case on Plankerton, I'm on Storm Shield level 6. So that means I've completed 6 of the SSD missions for Plankerton. In each zone, there are 10 levels, right? So essentially 10 SSD missions for each area. Once you get to mission 10 or level 10 with your Storm Shield, for that zone, you're then able to do something that's called endurance missions, which you don't need to worry about right off the bat. We're not going to be doing endurance missions for a while. Probably, I didn't start getting to a point where I was ready to do endurance missions in Stonewood until probably towards the end of Plankerton and the quest line for Plankerton. But it's an important concept just to know. The other thing to notice here is that, or pay attention to, is that the reason these missions matter so much, or the SSD missions matter so much, is that they're really key to unlocking certain aspects that affect your power level, right? And that's mainly powered through survivor squads and being able to have additional slots on your survivor squads. Okay, so I'm gonna hop out of here now. So I want to jump over to Stonewood, because that's where you're going to actually begin. And so we'll flip over that as we go. But while I'm doing that, let's just talk a little bit about what some of the advantages here are, and how you want to do these builds. Now, when we go back over to Stonewood, the first mission for the first SSD1 in Stonewood, it happens right after you finish the tutorial, and it actually walks you through the game walks you through it, and there's actually some required builds that it makes you do, right? So when you first start the game, you can see right here on the first page of Stonewood, home base Storm Shield Defense 1, right? So as soon as you're done the tutorial, right, this is the first mission that you're really going to launch into. Okay, so in Stonewood, here's your base. I'm just going to launch in here and go and show my base. Now, obviously, I've been playing for a little bit. I am going to redo this, add another video to the series once I've created a new account. I'm going to make a new account when account creation is turned on by Epic again here in mid-April, when they release Save the World for free. And I'll walk you through it on a brand new, fresh account, and we'll start from scratch. But for now, I'm going to just sort of show you what I've got and sort of what I can show you with my, my existing layout in Stonewood, and we'll talk about some important ideas. Now, the big thing about, that you really want to learn around the Storm Shield defenses is that they are very key to learning how to build and use traps. Obviously, you can use your weapons, right? You can use the abilities of your characters, and these are very important as well. But what they're really trying to drive home for you in these is learning how to build and trap and do things called funneling or tunneling of husks, to basically make trap tunnels that do the work for you. So as you get later into these missions, especially into endurance, the waves of husks that come are very large. There's a lot of them. They come in large numbers, and if you're just using your weapons and your abilities, you can get, and you will get, overwhelmed very, very quickly. So the whole idea here is that you're trying to learn how to build and how to use traps effectively. Now, in SSD1, again, it's an easy mission on purpose. And what you sort of see here, these wooden builds that I've put, it actually instructs you where to put builds, because it's as I've explained in the other videos, Stonewood is kind of an extended tutorial teaching you how to play the game. So all these wooden pieces here, it will, Ray, as sort of the protagonist of as the robot that's sort of speaking to us, she will instruct you, and the game will give you some outlines on where to place these. Right, so it's giving you some ideas of how to place floors and ceilings and walls, how you can edit them to make different shapes, like this lower wall, or put a door in, and it shows you how to put some basic traps in as well. Right, now, when you play this mission, I've obviously put something down which is called amplifiers, and I've got a lot of interesting builds here, right? These aren't all optimal, but they're sort of things that I've been experimenting and playing around with. But when you start, this will all be open. And because you won't have any amplifiers yet, your spawn points for the husks will be in this open area down here. So sort of right around this area in the middle, right? You'll be able to see it. You'll see those sort of telltale purple, purple spires, that sort of, purple smoke spires that designate where the spawn points are for the husks. So the husks are basically going to be coming up here for that first SSD1. And it's very simple, right? And it makes you build this structure here. And it's a good example of, hey, how you can get husks to go in here and do some trapping and use some of your basic weapons. My advice is always trying to, in those early missions, try, get in the habit early on of not using your guns, your ranged weapons, unless you absolutely need to, right? So one of its first lessons is really let traps do the work and do clean up with your melee as much as possible, right? That's an important piece, right? So this is sort of what they sort of tell you what to build in that tutorial mission, and it does a good job. And the husks, sort of come this way, and they go up this sort of this grassy knoll area. Now, the other thing you have to be aware of is that, as a test for yourself, if you can just sort of walk up an area with your character, husks will also be able to walk up there, right? So, as an example, they'll come here and they'll hit some of these walls, right? So if they hit these walls, then they're naturally going to sort of follow the least path, right? Husks take the path of least resistance, right? And there's a lot of complex things that we'll talk about later about how you can do different pathing and how different builds affect that. But we'll demonstrate some basic ones here. But for SSD1, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'm going to put a video link in here. LARSIS does a really good video where he actually has, he made a new account a couple of years ago, and he actually walks you through what SSD1 is and actually shows you how they tell you to build those things. So I encourage you to go take a look at that video because it shows you what the mission actually looks like and how to walk through it. It's very simple, right? After you complete SSD1, you're going to do another couple pages in the quest line before you get to SSD2 on page 2, right? It doesn't take very long, but once you get to page 2, what happens is it sort of says, hey, now you have to prepare to that attacks can come from any direction. So this is facing south, and you can see in the top right there we've got our little compass, right? This is facing south. So for SSD1, the husks spawn from the south, and they come up here, and you just have to survive one wave. When you do SSD2, it basically says, okay, now husks can also spawn from the east, and they can come from the west. And I'll show a build, later about how you can build those ones, but they can also come from the south, right? So, as you do some of those early missions, right, they can come from any of the three directions. So my advice is that, this is the build that they sort of have you build as part of the first SSD mission. It's sort of a tutorial, but I always encourage you to, you don't have to leave these here, right? And the south approach to your main home base is only there for a little while. Once you put this amplifier down here, the husks tend to come from the south anymore. Because if they're coming from the south, when you place this amplifier here, that means that the spawn points for husks can't spawn here anymore, right? So they might come over from this direction or from this direction, right? So the whole point here is like don't overbuild and don't overinvest early on in here, because some of these things we're going to tear down as it goes over. So don't be afraid to tear these down. In the home bases, if you break wood, right? So, for example, we go here and we break it, it always gives you the resources back for the build that you had. So you don't have to worry about losing your wood or your stone or your metal. What you don't get back though is if a build has a trap on it, you lose the trap, right? So if I break all these wood pieces here, you have to see I've got full pieces here, so I can't pick any more up. But you can see that the resources are left behind, right? As an example though, if I break this wooden floor with a trap on it, I don't get the trap back. So just remember in these SSD missions when you're building, the idea here is that you start here by building what you want, and then when you're ready, right, you go inside and you launch a mission. Now in this case, I've completed, see in my Storm Shield one here in Stonewood, I'm at shield level 10. So now I've unlocked endurance missions, right? But normally there would just be an expand the storm shield, and that kicks off the mission. So think of it this way: you've got, before you start the mission, you can place whatever builds and traps that you want, and think of those as those are there permanently, right? Every time you start a mission, right? If you start a storm shield mission, or if you start the war games, once you unlock it, whatever builds are in there before you begin, that's what the levels are. Now during those missions, they may get destroyed and damaged, but it's only for the mission, right? When a war game is done, the builds go back to what they basically reset to how you had them built before you started the mission, right? So also keep that in mind, right? So my ideas here, after you do SSD 1, right, and you go to do SSD 2 on page 2, you can experiment with this a little bit. So I sort of encourage people to sort of, hey, right, maybe take some of these. You can leave some of these pieces up if you want, but the idea here is that you want to be efficient with your traps. So let's just sort of let's just sort of start from scratch here. Just take all of these down, right? Just say we're sort of starting from scratch, right? And you can leave some defenses here. It's always good to block these off, right? So we'll just do with wood to begin with. All right, we've got a door, right? Now the idea here is that if that that dark metal there is about where the spawns come for the first one, right? So they're going to take this approach. Right, now the idea, some of the early ideas is to basically do funneling and control where you want the husks to go, so you can lead them into trap tunnels. Right, now as we saw here, right, they get stuck on this ledge here, so they're sort of going to naturally come up here, right? So if we want them to go up the ramp to make a more narrow approach, one of the easy things that we can do is we can sort of build our walls along here and then up to the side. Right, so now what happens is as these husks come up here, they're going to hit the wall, and they're going to naturally come this way. Okay, and there are other subtleties around when husks might attack these walls, but in general, right, if it's sort of 2 or 3 tiles with an opening, they'll have a general tendency not to attack on these. Every once in a while, you might find one that's just sort of some RNG in there where it might be attacking, so you have to watch a little bit, right? And sometimes there's some different pieces we'll get into later where, if you put sort of a secondary build on there. The thing of it is it's almost like a weighting system, right? Where it's just like, the more builds I have to go through, the less likely I'm going to sit here and attack it, because this is the path of least resistance, right? So if we've done something basic like this, right, we could sort of do some different control pieces around that. The other things that, I encourage you to sort of take a look at is when you do these builds, right, you can do different things like, as we get more into it, you can place the small builds like this. So if they're coming this way, okay, you're going to sort of funnel them this way. Lots of ideas of trying to slow husks down, right, is sort of a key piece of this, right? It's a key piece of the strategy. So put something like that in, right? So if they're coming here, they sort of got to go around here. Oh, they got to go around here, and then you're leading up this way. Now, when they get up here, we don't want them going over here and over here, because as they come to the top of the ramp, they sort of zero in on the settle of your storm base, right? So they're going to sort of make sort of a straight beeline for here, right? So, again, you can sort of control them a little bit. If you built a bunch of walls that sort of went this way and tried to get them to go, go over here, right? They may not, because as they hit this wall, they sort of go, right, it's only a single wall. rather than going around to get to it, my straightest path might just be to break this wall and go straight through, right? So you sort of want to keep that straight path, right? But you can use some of these like smaller walls to sort of make them, take some left and rights and slow them down a bit that way. So, as just as a basic one, usually, in the early game, if you're doing sort of a 2 or 3 tile trap tunnel, that's more than sufficient, especially for the south approach. We don't want to overbuild. So you can do something as simple as, hey, let's just put down, 2 floors, and let's just put a little bit of a curve in here just to sort of show an example, right? As to how they can, make some of these turns. Okay, so, what we can do is we can sort of go, okay, well, let's close this off, and this off, and this off, right? And you can do some of these pieces like this, right? So you can just do like a really basic trap tunnel, right? You can put some ceiling pieces in here, and maybe just, if you want to put these down here, right? Again, right? You might be careful with your resources. You don't want to build any more than you need to, right? So now the part here is that sometimes there's like, oh, there's a little ledge there where they could get over, right? So you'll learn this as you play. You can sort of just see where these things are. You can put a little piece there, right? So now we've got a pretty good tunnel here, right? They're coming up here, right? They're going to sort of naturally go to here to sort of head towards the trap tunnel, right? So now you can use, the idea is that the sooner you can be hitting them with traps, right, the better, right? Because you're damaging them as soon as further away from your base, right? So when you make this one, you can do a couple different traps here. Usually when you start off, the main traps that you're sort of working with are you've got wall darts, which we've got here. You've got wooden floor spikes, and then there's the retractable floor spikes, and then usually for the ceiling traps, you either have zappers, gas traps. Usually you start off, the ones you find the most early is like, gas traps, this one here, the electric field, or zappers. And we'll get more into what the different ones do, but early on, I would focus on, the less traps, the better. I mean, what you find as you go through the missions is sort of what you find, and we'll learn to use all of them. But I would sort of focus on sort of 4 main traps, right? As for the ceiling traps, later game, the gas traps combined with some other traps are really, really powerful. But I would suggest starting off with ceiling electric fields first for the ceilings. For the floors, I would either use the retractable floor spikes or the wooden floor spikes. And then for the walls, we'll just do the wall spikes, right, or the wall darts, right? So if we take here, let's go. Let's craft a couple of traps here. So we're going to grab. And again, you might craft these at the start, right? You might also, and you'll have lower versions of these when you begin. All right, so let's do a wooden floor spike. I think let's do a retractable floor spike. We've got a couple of wall darts, and let's make ourselves a couple electrical ceiling fields. Now, again, you're going to have probably green, right? Gray, green, or blue versions only at the start, and that's okay, right? These husks are weak when they start. So the idea here would be like, okay, we put on the floor, right? One of the first things is we can put down, right, wooden floor spikes, right? Those do a couple things. They do damage to husks, but they also slow them down, okay? So those are a good trap to put. If we want more damage, we can put retractable floor spikes. They don't slow husks down, but they do more damage. That's an example, right? If we want to take a look at a good trap for the wall, reason why we suggest the wall darts early on is that wall darts can shoot, they will detect and shoot up to 3 tiles away. So we go 1, 2, 3, right? Even as the husks start to come up here, it'll trigger and start shooting them as soon as they start coming up this hill. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use these, and we'll talk about them more going forward. But they're really good. Now the reason why I say focus on the ceiling electric fields is that they can fire up to 3 tiles. Up to 2. I think it's like a range of 3 tiles around, right? And they can be too tall. So if you had, even if we extended this and sort of had it down here, even though this is sort of 2 tiles off, if I placed in a ceiling an electric field there, it would still hit, enemies down here. So it's got some interesting range to it, right, that some of the other traps don't have, and it fires more frequently, and it can do damage to multiple enemies at once. Where if you take something like the zapper, right, which is, I don't have one crafted here at the moment, but if we take a look at the zapper, which is here, it does more damage, but it only does damage to a single target. So there's lots of different things to sort of talk about strategies there, but in the early game, it's like, okay, if you've got, a couple floors, this does some damage, the zapper does some damage, this does some damage, the wall darts do some damage, that, that's pretty good, right? You might not need anything more than that, right? And in the worst, places, you maybe, maybe I might put, I might put a second one here so as they come around this corner, right, they get hit as well too, right? So I encourage you to build something like this, not because it's necessary, right? The first missions for SSD1 and SSD2, the husks that are going to come from the south are not that powerful, and the waves aren't that large. I suggest you do this as a way of just early ways of starting to get comfortable and familiar with how these different things of pathing and tunnels work, right? It's a really important thing to learn, because as you get deeper into the game, it becomes really foundational, right? So we've got all this other area and space here, but we don't have to worry about it because, right, their only way to get up here, right, when we sort of come over here and take a look at it this way, right, the only way to get up there, the way we've built this, right, is to come up here, right? And so now we've made a choke point and basically a kill tunnel and a kill box. That's a really, really important concept as you go through the game and learn more, right? So I'll get some gameplay once I create my new account. Right, we'll actually show you coming through here. But like I said, this does a really good job of sort of funneling them all in here. And, what I sort of recommend on some of these things is you can do some different approaches where you can just hang back in here, right? And you're going to be tempted to run out here and just use your weapons, right? And just, fire and everything and kill them. But I do really recommend learning to just, let the traps do the work, right? Hang back in here, right? And, let them come to you, right? Let them come through the traps. And you're there just mopping up. And this is where you can use your melee weapon, right? Whatever you happen to have, right? Early on in the game, right? When you look at your melee weapons, it gives you some to start with. Or it's like, this handmade ruler, you'll probably have that, and you can craft one, right? So use that, right? Let them come through, let the traps do the damage, and you're just sort of laying back here doing cleanup duty, right? So yeah, right? And you can even do interesting things like, hey, if you want to do just to slow them down a little bit more and still attack them. I've seen people do stuff like this where, right, they're coming in through here, any of them to get here, they'll stop and attack this piece of wood first, which means you can just sit here on the other side, because your weapons don't do damage to your own builds. So as they come butt up against this wall, you can just melee them like you're going crazy, and as long as they don't have a ranged attack, right, you're kind of safe, right? You can sort of stay a couple steps back here and just mop up. So these types of ideas are just important to learn on, get into your head early on when you start playing Save the World. Okay. So, with that said, I wanted to do a couple of things we would talk about quickly. I want to take a look at our fort stats, right? So, and why it gets important. So, some of the rewards that we get from completing this mission is that you get your first survivor squad, and we'll hop out and take a look at that. You get your first survivor squad. You get your first survivor to put in your survivor squad, and you get access to Base Kyle, who is, I think one of the strongest constructors, one of the base constructors in the entire game. And they become even more important when you do these builds, and we'll talk about that in a different video, right? But as a short preview, constructors can put a build on here, which basically strengthens the base. So they pop down this, almost this mechanical augmenter on top of the base, and then based on a tile or thing of certain radius, the builds get basically armor on them, and makes them that much makes them much tougher. It also applies extra strength and durability to any traps that are attached to those walls or floors or ceilings or whatever they happen to be, right? So you get those rewards from completing this mission, which are really important. right? So let's hop out here a little bit. We'll just hop out of this mission, and I'll show you a little bit about what those fort pieces look like, and then we will sort of wrap this video up, and we'll wait for the next episode. So let's just hop over quickly, and we'll just sort of show you what I mean by what those fort stats mean and why they're so important. Okay, so if we come up here and we go to our command, and we can say here, hit the left stick to see all my stats. So we can see here that I've got Fort, right, which stands for Fortitude, Offense, Resistance, and Tech. And I have different levels of those based on my hero's level, right, my power level as a character, which levels up as you complete more quests, as well as my survivor squads, right? So Fortitude is basically essential to your health. How much health do you have? Offense has, basically these are multipliers that go on my weapon damage. Resistance is based around your shield, right? How many shields do I have? How quickly do they regenerate? How long is the delay before they start to regenerate? Those types of things. And then tech is the ability and trap damage. So the traps that I place there, like the ceiling electric field, how much damage does it do? It puts multipliers on that, as well as things like our going commando abilities for our player. It puts those things in there as well too. Right, so you can see here when you sort of take a look at it, hey, this is all the impact that my fort is having on all of my stats and abilities. Now, when we take a look at the survivor squad, right, you get your first, doing SSD1 and SSD2 unlock some of your first squads. So the first one that you'll unlock will be this one here. I think is the scouting party, right? I think is the first one that you unlock. And you'll have the slots that are in here that you can see. These unlock over time. At the start, you're just going to have a single slot open. As you continue doing more missions and doing more SSD missions across Stonewood and Plankerton and Canny Valley, you unlock more and more and more of these slots, right? And the more survivors you have in these squads, the more they multiply and augment your fortitude, right? So you go back and look at my hero here, right? And you go to your hero loadout. You can see that, I don't have, even without support heroes, my health is, almost 9,000. My shields is almost 3,500. Right? So I get a lot of benefits from that through the fort pieces. So that, getting your power level up and getting your hero those extra buffs is the main way of just getting stronger and stronger in the game. So survivors and survivor squads end up being really important. Right? On the other pact, when we take a look at the constructors, you'll get I think it's a green copy or the common copy here of base Kyle, right? And we take a look at base, right? Because he's a constructor, he gets that base class perk, and we can see that when we look at that, right? It reinforces attached structures with 60 armor, and it goes 4 segments from placement. And I'll also do a separate video about what that looks like because it's a bit interesting how that placement works, but that works really well. And then if you use base Kyle, he, as a commander perk, has lofty architecture, which increases the building health by 84%. So, if you think you'd have a normal wood build, right, you're getting 60 armor applied to that wooden wall, and then its hit points, its health are increased by 84% if you're using base Kyle as your commander in your loadout. So that's really, really powerful, especially early game when you're trying to protect different things like atlases in Fight the Storm missions. That those extra hit points, it just takes the husks longer to get through your builds, which gives you more time to sort of mop them up and clean them up, either with your melee or your abilities or your ranged weapons. The other things that you get from finishing that first mission, and I'll even take a look at it here when I go back to the quests, right, is that you get some XP. Right, and there's a bunch of different styles of XP, right? There's hero XP, there's schematic XP. I'm sorry, it's not hero XP anymore. It's people XP. So we take a look at this first page here. We see here that you get a common survivor. You unlock the scouting party. You get base Kyle as a hero. You get a couple different types of XP, and then you get something here called X-ray tickets. So you get 100 X-ray tickets. And those are important because if you go over to the exchange and look at the X-ray piece here, here are these llamas. Now, early game, and we'll do a separate video on this to talk about this more, but there are sort of these upgrade llamas which always cost 50 tickets. And then there are these, other llamas here, and these vary. These could be legendary, legendary troll stash, or soldier ones. Like there's a bunch of different types of these, and their cost can range anywhere from 500 tickets to 1,000 tickets. Early game though, the big piece is just to try to get as many schematics and heroes and survivors as you can. So, usually we sort of recommend, as you go through the first couple of missions, is as you get X-ray tickets, come and buy these upgrade llamas and just fill out your inventory, right? Because you're going to start off here when you take a look at your armory and go look at your schematics here. You're not going to have very many things at all. You're going to be mostly empty. And so, buying those cheap upgrade llamas for the first little bit is a good use of your X-ray tickets, so you can just sort of get stuff in your inventory. All right. Now, the other thing that you'll have advantage, which is new to you, they added this only very recently, is that as you find things in the mission, if you find a weapon or if you find a trap, it basically says, hey, right, these are the things that you picked up during the mission, right? So as we can see here, right, I picked up a copper breacher, I picked up a Highlander sword, and you picked up a couple wooden floor spikes. You can convert one of these to a schematic, right? So you sort of say, hey, if I don't have the Highlander sword, right, you can convert it and it will give you that schematic, right? And if you go up to your schematics, you can say, oh, right, that's a new one, there it is, and now I can craft that if I want to, right? So that's, so the idea here is there's lots to unpack there, right? The idea around the build philosophy for SSD 1 and SSD 2 in Stonewood is, clean the area, right? Remember, these are expendable. We're going to get rid of these over time as we build the amplifiers and expand our, the spawns for the husks are going to keep moving further and further out. So, use some resource light, but play around a little bit, right? To just experiment with how you can get husks to move, right, around builds without attacking them, and how you can use traps to do most of the work for you. And then we'll, as we get to the next videos here, as we go through, we'll do videos for some of the different SSD missions in Stonewood, as well as when we start placing amplifiers and those types of things, because in the early game, outside of doing your quests and moving through, you can see here that these storm shield defenses are part of that transition, right? Every page, almost every page has one, right? And the Stonewood quests take you up to Storm Shield Defense 6, right? And then you move on to Plankerton and you start doing the Plankerton piece. So, one of the things I'll also remind you about SSD missions that, the quest line will take you up to 6, and then you start moving into Plankerton, and now you're upgrading the Plankerton Storm Shield Defense. I'm going to recommend it while as we go through the video series, as you do this, even when you get into Plankerton, you still want to come back, right, to Stonewood and keep doing these SSD missions to get them up to level 10. Even if you're not going to do the endurance missions, you're going to want to unlock these, because as you unlock them, they provide, they unlock more and more parts of your survivor squads, which is really, really, really important. Okay. So that's, basically what's going to happen with, your storm shield defenses, 1 and 2, when you're in Stonewood. And yeah, I'll get a fresh account when account creation fires up again. I'll do some videos for you and just show you what it looks like. If you want to see what SSD1 looks like again, take a look at LARSIS' video, which will be linked in the description of the video. He's got a walkthrough of it that is still accurate and good to look at. And yeah, the next video will start continuing to go through your journey through Stonewood and more game mechanics. We're going to start talking about the different mission types, right? We're going to start talking about, hey, what is a Fight the Storm mission? How is it different from Ride the Lightning or Retrieve the Data, right? The early game piece of, hey, what are resupply missions? They're very useful. You're going to use them a lot. What are they? So we'll go through some overviews of what these different mission types are, especially the ones that are in through Stonewood, and what are some strategies for how best to do these missions efficiently and get the most out of them. Okay. So thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. Appreciate everyone coming there. Please, put pieces in the comments if you have questions or asks around strategy or things you run into. Certainly put things in the comment section. I will take a look at them and try to answer them as best I can. And until then, we will see you in the next video.